Hi, my name is Abby. I have been watching knitting podcasts for quite a while and decided, kind of on a whim, to film this video, show you a few of my finished objects and works in progress, and see how it goes. The first finished object that I want to show you today is what I'm wearing right now. This is the Ramble Shawl by Andrea Mowry of Dre Renee Knits. It is a brioche shawl. It's asymmetrical. This was my first ever brioche project, and I didn't have any trouble with it. Um, I had never knit one color or two color brioche. I had never done any sort of increases or decreases in brioche. Um, and I thought the pattern was super clear. It was easy to read. Um, Again, I really didn't have any problems with it. I did put in a couple of lifelines just to keep me on track, and I did have to rip back a few times. But I actually found that the process of tinking back brioche stitch, especially with the increases and the decreases, really helped me to understand how brioche works. So it actually was beneficial to me to make a couple of mistakes because I was able to tink back and really understand it. Um, I did not use the suggested yarn. The suggested yarn was beautiful, but also very expensive. So I substituted it out for Knit Picks Capra. It's a DK weight yarn. It is a cashmere and merino blend, similarly to the suggested yarn. So it's pretty close. It's just a more affordable substitute. And the colorways that I used were cream and caviar. And I used the recommended needle size, which was US 7 4.5 millimeter. I didn't change anything about the pattern except for the yarn. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna take it off and show you the shape. It's a very interesting shape. As I mentioned earlier, it's an asymmetrical shawl. So on this side, we have the brioche. It's beautiful, in my opinion. And then you have the point there. And then the other side is longer. And this is garter stitch stripes to that corner. So yeah, I love this shawl. It's so squishy, it's so warm. I haven't worn it very much yet because I'm waiting for the weather to get a little bit cooler, but I have worn it a couple of times. The one thing about the yarn that I have to say, while it is beautiful, it was lovely to work with, and it is so squishy and soft, it does tend to pill more than I was expecting. I think I remember reading reviews about that on Knitpicks website. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this, but it's a little bit fuzzy looking already, and I really haven't. I've worn it like once, so that's just something to be aware of. It's not that expensive. I think I found the yarn on sale, so it's not that expensive, but it might pill a little bit more than you were hoping. Which I don't know, doesn't bother me too much, but it does look like I've worn it more times than I actually have. Okay, the next finished object that I want to show you is actually another brioche project. This was my first brioche project that I'd ever knit, and I loved it so much that I think the second project that I cast on after finishing that shawl was a brioche cowl. So definitely a huge fan of brioche. I will be knitting with it a lot more. It's so enjoyable to knit. It looks amazing. You can do so many different things with it. If you have not tried the brioche stitch, at least like knit a swatch and see what you think of it, because you really can produce some very beautiful knits. And in addition to that, it's also so much fun to knit. It's so enjoyable. So this is, I'm counting it as a finished object. Still have some ends to weave in. Haven't blocked it yet. Oops. But this is the Windrow by Bristol Ivy. As you can tell, it's a one color brioche. It's a pretty small cowl, but I did modify it to make it a little bit smaller, so I'll explain that in a couple of minutes. But I want to show you the design. You can see that a lot better. It's going to blow out the background, but that's definitely the design of the cowl. It's very beautiful. It uses simple increases and decreases placed in the right spots to produce this wavy pattern. The yarn that I used for this was another Knit Picks yarn. I used Preciosa Tonal, and the color that I used was Panther. And I was looking for a very tonal yarn, but this is a gift, and the recipient wanted it in black. So I was thinking, you know, black is not the best yarn color to use for a pattern like this, because, you know, really all that this has got going for it is the pattern itself. So I really wanted that to show up. But this tonal is actually gorgeous. It really is a tonal. It's grays and it's blacks, and you really can see the pattern of it very well. So I'm really happy with how that turned out. It's super soft. It's really squishy. Yeah, I really like it. So my one modification with this cowl is that I used needles 2 sizes smaller than what the pattern recommends, because I really wanted a structured, technical kind of cowl. I think that really matches the aesthetic of the pattern well, and I'm really happy with how that modification turned out. I'm glad that I didn't have to modify the actual stitch count of the pattern. The recipient wanted the cowl a bit smaller. I don't really feel comfortable yet with brioche to like modify patterns. So I was really hoping that just using a smaller needle could change the cowl size just enough to make it a little bit smaller than the sample project shows. And I'm really happy with how that turned out. I really want to knit one of these for myself because I just think it's great. The third project I have is another cowl. I knit a lot of scarves and cowls, apparently. This is actually one of my own designs, and it is currently being tested. So this pattern is called Cathedral. I'm not going to share too many details about it. I will share the yarn that I used because it's a gorgeous yarn. It is Madeline Tosh Light. So it's kind of a light fingering, and here's a bit of a close-up of the lace pattern. This is coming out mid-October to purchase the pattern. I think all of my testers except for one are currently finished, so maybe it'll come out a little bit sooner than that, but I'm really excited to publish this pattern. It will be my second pattern that I've published on Ravelry, but my first knit pattern, so it's exciting. Okay, and then let's see, I just have socks left, so I'm going to show you a bunch of socks. This pattern is the Mercury socks by Kim Drodar on Ravelry. This is a free pattern. I think every podcaster or knitter I follow on Instagram has knit these socks. It's a very popular pattern for very good reason, because they are super fun to knit. They have this lace design on the top of the foot. It's very easy lace. It's easy to memorize. You don't have to even pay attention that much. So it's just a really nice, simple pattern. The yarn that I used is Premier Yarns Serenity Sock in the color Charcoal. It's just a cheap yarn. I think I even bought it on sale, so it's even cheaper. It's not the best yarn, but it definitely does the job. It's kind of a merino nylon, like some other synthetic fiber blend. I really like these. I think these were my second pair of socks that I have ever knit. So don't be intimidated by socks. They're not difficult. I think the only thing you need to worry about is the fact that once you start knitting socks, you're going to get addicted and you're going to knit a lot of socks. So the next two pairs that I have are men's size socks. So they took a little while to knit, but I finished them. These are both gifts. I do not have man-sized feet. I'm a pretty short person. So these, I'm just gonna show them to you because I don't know. There's not actually a whole lot to really talk about. I have one end to weave it. The cuff is pretty short. I used a traditional heel flap and gusset heel, and then I used the Kitchener snitch to graft the toe. I didn't have a pattern for these. I just kind of made up my own numbers, and I think these are like the second socks that I knit. Yeah, I knit, these were the third pair of socks. Can't remember what I said earlier, but these are the third pair, and then these are the second pair of socks that I ever knit. So I am a pretty new sock knitter. I use the same yarn as my Mercury socks, the Premier Yarn Serenity sock. This is the color navy. It's just kind of it's a very sturdy sock yarn. It's a little bit soft. It's also superwash, very easy to care for. That's the kind of yarn that I needed for the recipient of these socks. So it worked out. Yeah, I think that's all I need to share. Oh, I used a US 1 2.25 millimeter needle for all of these socks. That's the only needle size I've tried for socks, and I like it. I might try going down to a 0 at some point, but for now I'm just using US 1s, and I like that size a lot. The third pair of socks that I'm showing, I did use a pattern. This is the pattern by Susan B. Anderson. It's more of a recipe than it is a pattern. It is, it's a blog post of Susan's called How I Make My Socks. It's really just a simple recipe for, it has the math that she uses, which is nice to refer back to. I think she only has one size though. I think she only has the size for how she makes them for her size foot. I can't remember if there are suggestions for altering that size or not, but I did. I think these are a 76 stitch sock. They could be 72, but I'm pretty sure that they're 76. And I made these to fit a size US men's 12 foot. So they're pretty long. They're pretty long socks. Here's the heel to the toe. Small cuff. Again, I like shorter cuffs, and so do the recipients of these socks. 2x2 rib. For these, I forgot to say I did a 1x1 rib for the cuff, but instead of knitting everything in the correct orientation of the stitch, I knit the purls through the back loop. So typically 1x1 knit through the back loop, you're knitting the knit stitches through the back loop, but I decided actually to knit the purls through the back loop, and that kind of tightened up my knit stitches a little bit, so it looks just a little bit cleaner looking. Anyway, for these I did 2x2 cuff, short leg, and then I knit traditional heel flap and gusset heel, again Kitchener stitch to graft the toe. That seems to be my method of sock knitting. I have also tried toe up. I think I prefer cuff down, but I did like both ways. So I've definitely knit more cuff down socks now than I had before. The yarn I'm using is kind of another cheap yarn. It is Patons Classic Wool in, where's the colorway? Cadet Colors? No, sorry, this is Patons Croy sock, which I think probably everyone has knit socks from this yarn before. It's just 100% wool yarn. It's a little bit thicker than other sock yarns, but I still used a US 1, a 2.25 millimeter needle, so they're a little bit dense, which I like. I like that. So those are all the finished objects I have. Now I'm going to move on to works in progress, which I have quite a few, so I might kind of rush through these a little bit. First I want to share another pair of socks. I'm sorry for those who don't like sock knitting. This is probably boring. If you do like sock knitting, hopefully this is interesting, but most of these have been vanilla socks, so I also have another pair of vanilla socks that I'm working on right now. I'm using a paid-for pattern by Susan B. Anderson. This is the Smooth Operator Socks, and it is a lovely pattern. It's very informational. It has a lot of pictures in it to help you understand how to work the pattern. It is an afterthought heel, which I had never tried before, and I like that. I wanted to do contrasting heels and toes for these socks. These are my Christmas socks, so I'm excited about these. I'm thinking I can get them done before Christmas. If I focus on them, I can totally knit them before then. I'm also planning on entering these in the knit along that Amy from the Stranded podcast is conducting, and I'm trying to remember what the knit along is called. It's some sort of festive knit along. I should have looked it up and wrote it down, but I had forgotten that I was going to enter these until just now. But I do plan on entering those into this. I do plan on entering these into that knit along. I'm using Knit Picks Stroll in the color Dove Heather, and then the red is called Hollyberry, I think, and it's just this deep red. So I thought those were pretty colors together for Christmas. As you can tell, I have quite a bit more left of the foot, but I've done the heel, and I did about 6 inches for the cuff. And then my progress keeper here is this little squid. I picked this charm up at a store somewhere a while ago. Turned it into a progress keeper. I think it's kind of cute. I think that's all I have to share about these socks. This is my first afterthought heel. I've really been wanting to expand my knowledge with socks and try out different methods and make sure that I really know what I'm doing when I knit socks. Okay, another work in progress. I have the Tesserino cowl by Marie Chiba. It is a free pattern on Ravelry. This is a mosaic knitting cowl. I have never done mosaic knitting before, so I wanted to try it. So here's what it looks like. It's obviously not blocked because it's still on the needles, so it's gonna look pretty wonky and weird until it's actually finished. But here's here's kind of an example of what the stitch pattern is. It's a really interesting color work pattern, and it looks like Fair Isle, but it's not. It's a technique, like I said, called mosaic knitting. It's where you slip stitches instead of actually working 2 different colors. So I am using 2 different colors, obviously, but not within the same round. You only use 1 color per round. So it's very easy to knit. It's really interesting. Actually, I made a mistake on accident a couple of rows back, so I'm in the process of tinking back to that to fix it. It's not a difficult pattern. I just wasn't paying attention. I'm using the Drops Lima yarn. These are the colors 4377 for the purple, and then 9020 for this kind of gray linen color. So that's what I'm doing. And then I'm also working these on US 6 4mm needles. So hopefully I can just kind of focus on this and get it done. I haven't actually worked on it in quite a while, so I need to get back to that. I am also knitting the Roku beanie. I think I'm saying that correctly. I think it actually has a pronunciation guide in the pattern. I just haven't, tells you how long I have had this on my needles. I need to finish this. This is a paid for pattern. It is a simple 1x1 rib beanie, but it has a lot of great techniques in it to create the perfect crown with the decreases, it has a really nice cast on. So the edge looks nice. Yeah, it's just, again, it's a simple 1x1 rib beanie. I just wanted a beanie I could throw on in the winter. I'm almost done with it. I think I have a couple more inches for the rest of the hat before I start the decreases, but I'm using Patons yarn again. This is the Patons Classic Wool in the colorway Dark Gray Marl. I'm using 2 sizes smaller needles than what was called for in the pattern. I'm using size 4 3.5 millimeter. This is the needles I got gauge on, so that's what I'm knitting. I'm really excited to finish this actually. I've been looking for a nice 1x1 rib beanie for a long time, and I've tried different patterns and they just don't look that great to me. They don't look good on me. So I'm really hopeful for this pattern. I think it's going to look really nice. I'm working on a couple of blankets. I actually just started the one I'm about to show you yesterday. So I'm not that far into it. I only have granny squares to show for it. This is a crochet project. I don't crochet as much as I knit. I do still enjoy crochet though. This is the Heirloom Blanket pattern by Abigail Rose Crochets. I follow her on Instagram. We've been Instagram friends for a while, and I'm changing up the pattern a little bit. So here's a granny square. It's really pretty. It's kind of like a doily granny square a little bit, and I'm making them in white and gray. But the pattern calls for fingering weight yarn with I think a size J crochet hook. So it calls for small yarn and a bigger hook. I'm actually using bigger yarn with a smaller hook, which is why I'm getting a very solid looking granny square. I think I don't know, I just decided I liked that better for the blanket that I'm making. Started this last night, so I don't have that many granny squares, but these are super fun to crochet. I'm having a lot of fun with this blanket. In the process of making another one right now. So you start out with a circle and then you keep making it into a square, which is cool. I am not using, as I mentioned, the suggested yarn or hook size. This is a little bit crazy to show. I'm using these. These are the biggest skeins that I've ever seen in my life. I didn't know that skeins like this existed until I was at Michael's the other day and I saw them and they were actually on sale. They're super cheap to begin with and they were on sale. So this is, how many yards is this? So many. 1,020 yards or 932 meters of worsted weight yarn in one skein. So I feel crazy with like using these. This is the Lion Brand Pound of Love yarn. It is definitely a pound, that's for sure. It's kind of it's not a super soft yarn. It's not super scratchy either. It's just kind of a cheap acrylic yarn that I picked up because blankets are expensive. So I decided to get some cheap yarn to make this blanket out of. But I'm liking the colors. I'm liking the way it's working up. So I'm using the gray and the white. The gray is called Oxford Gray. White. It's called white. And then with that, I'm using a size F 3.75 millimeter hook. Okay, the second blanket that I want to show you is actually not a pattern. It's just something that I'm working up as I go. It's also, this one I have been working on for a couple of weeks, so it's pretty big. I don't think I'm going to be able to show you the whole thing, but here's an example of it. So it's just this double and single crochet stitch, and I have a lot of it done so far. It's a very wide blanket. It's actually a little bit too wide. I might actually rip it out and start over because it's going to require so much yarn. I've already bought 12 skeins for this blanket. It's a super bulky blanket. I don't like working with bulky yarn, but I really wanted a blanket like this, so I'll do it for the outcome. The yarn I'm using is Lion Brand Wool Ease Thick and Quick in the color Marble. So it's a really pretty colorway with grays and whites and kind of a deeper heather gray. Yeah, I won't talk too much about it. I might write up a pattern for it. I haven't decided yet. And to go along with that, I'm using a size in or a 10mm crochet hook. So big hook, big yarn, hurts my hands, but I'm doing it. Okay, I just have a couple of more projects that I'm going to kind of breeze through. I don't have patterns for what I'm about to show you because I'm just kind of making it up as I go, but I am knitting dishcloths as gifts for someone. I'm just kind of making these up as I go, but here's one that I have finished. It's just a diagonal kind of pattern with pearls, really simple stitch. I'm just kind of making up whatever stitch patterns I feel will give a lot of texture to create a nice dishcloth that cleans well. I'm using Lily Sugar and Cream, I think is the cotton that I'm using in the color white for white, and I think this color is called Jute. So here's one that's still on my needles. I'm counting this as a work in progress because I'm making a set with neutrals and the set is not done yet. I only have the one I just showed you, and then this one is on the needle still. I have it like scrunched up on my double pointed needle right now, but here's the stitch pattern for that. So I'm actually making the set with 4 different types of dishcloths. So they're all going to be the same size, they just have different patterns, and I thought that would just keep it interesting. I hate knitting dishcloths. They're great gifts though, and they're also really nice to have. They're just really sturdy and they work well. My yarn is all tangled up in my needles here. It happens to me way too often. Ah. But I just cast on for a new sock design that I'm working on, so I'm actually not going to share anything about it. But the reason that I brought that up is because it is living in a project bag that I sewed myself, which I'm actually really proud of it. I'm not a sewer. My grandma taught me how to sew years ago, and my little sister is great at sewing. She makes clothes and she's amazing. So I was over at their house the other day and I had bought some fabric because I really wanted to try making project bags to hold my knitting. This is just a really simple drawstring bag, but it has a bottom. So I'm not sure, it's a very patterned fabric, but my seams are lined up right there. I'm really proud of that. Figured out the drawstring. I just put some ribbon on the top for the drawstring, but it's just a great, little project bag to throw your socks into. I really want to start making more of these. I don't love sewing, but it's kind of fun sometimes. I kind of enjoy it sometimes. So hopefully I have a bit more fabric, so I want to make a few more of these, but they're just really nice to have little project bags to throw your knitting into. My knitting always gets tangled with everything if I throw it in like my backpack or my purse, and like stitches fall off the needles, and it's just a lot easier to contain it in one bag. I don't have many project bags. In fact, this is like my only project bag, so I really want to make some more of those so I can have those to store my knitting. That is everything I have to show. That was kind of a lot of projects. Yeah, but I'm working on a lot of stuff right now. I don't normally have this many things cast on at one time, but it just kind of happened that way. And I'm getting into designing, so I have a lot that I'm working on. I have a lot more that I'm working on that I'm not going to share just yet. But as I continue those patterns, I hope to share them at least. I know I will be sharing them on my Instagram, where you can follow me at More Knits. And I don't know if this is going to be a thing. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue this. This was a lot of fun to record, though. I hope it was enjoyable to watch, and we'll see what happens.